Hello and welcome to FAQ number 13 for season 2 of the 10x10. We're wrapping it up right now, and I gotta say it was a really good run. I've got a hint of the yield numbers. We had our trim party, so that video is gonna be coming out here soon. I'm gonna grab the FAQ sheet and just get started. I did wanna give a shout out to Grassroots though. They sent the sweatshirt, it just landed this morning and I really like it. It says Soil Life, says Grassroots on the back. And so I really appreciate that, thank you. So happy new year, and I appreciate you guys following along. All of last year, it was the first year that we had this YouTube series. So thank you very much. 2022, we're really looking forward to. We already have a base of subscribers that are asking questions, and we intend to make even more content this year. So with that, let's get started. First question, J.New says, hi Jeremy, what's the difference between the BAS worm castings and the Colorado Worm Company castings? Really good question, I'm glad you put that in here. The reviews on the BAS site indicate that both are good, but there's a difference in price. All right, so the Cowoco, the Colorado Worm Company castings, we call him Cowoco. He's the homie, and that's local, that's made with thermophilic compost on a local multiple generation family with homestead water rights, clean, like organically fed horses and grass and compost piles that he makes. Very duplicatable, but very long process. And they're some of the best castings I've ever worked with. He also comes and buys in specialty amendments and adds them to the compost before he works them with the worms, really following the Coot method. If you've seen our most recent video that just came out, interviewing Coot, it actually gives Colorado Worm Company castings a really huge shout out, because I sent Coot a bag. Cowoco gave it to me and I sent it to Coot because I just wanted to show off a little bit that someone local had followed through with the entire vision of what he shared. And so that's what that represents. That's why there's a more expensive price. It's a family business. It's hand harvested in very small batches. So we only ship out what we have fresh available from that week, that month. Nothing is like brought in bulk. It's him, his wife, and his kids. I mean, they literally do this by hand. Big difference. Now, the BAS castings that we get in, we have to mix soil. And if I had to mix soil with the Cowoco castings, we would literally wipe them out in the first order. And BuildASoil is all about high quality. We want to find the best mom and pop businesses, or really the best high quality businesses. And it just seems like small batch, high quality with artisan care and love is really where it's at. I would encourage you to find your own local worm producer if you can, but if you can't, Cowoco is the best I've seen. The BAS castings, they're not bad at all. We buy them in and it's in bulk. So the reason why I like them so much is that we are very specific on testing all the brands throughout the United States that we have access to in enough volume. And when you actually get a sample and you send it to the lab, there's a wide difference in what's available in bulk. And unfortunately, most of the people that are gonna be mixing soil at like a landscape yard or at a soil company, a lot of times you just wanna buy whatever the cheapest price is. And if you do that, you can get worm castings that come in that are maybe not as nutrient rich as the Cowoco, but what they do have is out of balance, and it can be a problem. And a lot of times they're made from products that we wouldn't really want in the garden anyways, from, you know, like recycling human manure or paper waste or weird stuff that's good for recycling, not good for our actual garden. And so the BAS castings are very specific. We have high calcium. So if you were to send them to the lab, you'd see calcium at the very top. And at the very bottom, you'd see very small amounts of sodium, which is ideal for soil mixing. Not only that, but when we send them off for heavy metal testing, the BAS castings, very low in heavy metals, high in calcium, low in sodium, low in potassium, in the sense that most compost, I know potassium sounds good, but when you get a compost, usually it's like triple or quadruple the K over the P. And this creates an inversion that's very hard to catch up with organically by adding other sources of P into your soil or phosphorus. So just know that the BAS castings are very balanced, really good for soil mixing, and super cost effective because we buy them by the truckload. That being said, Cowoco is the heady, and there's just not an unlimited supply, and he's not gonna be scaling the business up much larger. So it is what it is, and I really recommend, if you can get your hands on some, check out the Cowoco. So hopefully that answers your question. We're actually gonna have an interview with him soon just because people wanna know more. He's a good buddy of mine and he makes a great product. And so we're gonna have him in here and do a little interview about his process, and I think that might help you as well. Okay, next question. I could talk about castings all day, so. Shep says, in an earth box, how often should we realistically be adding root-wise in bloom? Are the microbes reproducing in that nice, always moist earth box, leading to us not needing to add more as often? I think yes. I think that with microbes in a situation where there's a lot of life, it's definitely not needed to add them as often as a hydro situation. However, There's some benefits when you do a top dressing. I'm of the belief like you that in a living soil, in an earth box, when things stay moist, those microbes are not just dying off. But what they are doing is they're shifting in balance towards what the plant is exuding and towards what that moment of time is. And a lot of people will say that's all you want. You want to inoculate and let the plant relationship steer it. But we're not in a large acreage situation. I still feel like there's limitations in a smaller container. And so what I'd like to do is recharge that from time to time with an inoculation of the root wise, making sure that if I'm in a top dress, I'm using some of the biofos at that point if I'm in flower. And I also want to hit it with the enzymes. Part of it is I want to make that top dress available faster. Now, as you saw in the recycled earth box, I had so many worms in there. They went to town eating the top dress so fast. I don't know if I could have accelerated that process. I will say that I don't have a validated scientific answer for this. My gut feeling, and I think Kevin from Rootwise would very much mirror my feeling right now because of where we came from, is that less is more. Even with his product where we're talking about, yeah, I'd like to sell more, but when you look at the instructions on the bag, it talks about application per soil volume, not per water volume like most companies. Now, people demand to know like how much should I put in a 5-gallon bucket of water. So there's some basic instructions, but typically you're gonna say per acre, I want this many grams. And so per volume of soil, like for 1 cubic foot that's in the earth box, you just don't need that much. And I feel like you can be overdoing it, erring on the side of wasting money. The good news is you're not gonna hurt anything by overdoing it other than the budget. It will constantly inoculate with a diverse consortium. They'll go to do their job and it'll start to balance to what the container sort of needs at that point. If you're on a really low temperature or there's some weird things going on, potentially inoculating could help you. But I think if things are healthy and you're trusting the process, I would say what you said is very true. Less is more in that situation. To be clear, less is more. If you have an issue, corrective doses are a great way to apply a product like a biological. Also, when you top dress, I think it's a good opportunity to speed things up. So hopefully that helps answer your question. Oh, there's more. Hey, Jeremy, can you make a video on when and how to collect pollen from males and how to properly store it? Thanks. Yes, I'll be doing this. I'm not an expert, so I'll be having experts chime in and make sure that we are teaching the right things. But I've done enough of this to make sure that I cover the basics and I know how to keep pollen around. So when we go to collect it in part of the next series, I'm not sure if we're gonna make it part of season 3, so to speak, or if we're actually gonna make it a standalone breeding series that goes along with season 3. There's gonna be some nuances there based on plant count, how we wanna grow the females versus the males. And so we'll discuss that as we get going, but we're absolutely gonna talk about pollen and collecting it and making sure that you know how to do that properly. Because it's beyond just storing it properly. I like you to harvest the mature pollen at the right time as well, instead of just, you know, a little like clone in the window with some really weak pollen, if that makes sense. All right, next question. Ed says, Jeremy, when is the best time to do a soil test? For time and reamendment purposes, would you do it after harvest or sometime prior to harvest? It's a good question. You know, when you're running a farm on acreage, it seems a little bit easier to understand because you're like, well, I have one season, I would test before and after. And of course, you can even do mid-season testing. I think that the answer lies in what you're trying to accomplish. So if you're trying to reamend for the next round, I think it would be advantageous to test it before you harvest. Usually that last couple weeks, not a lot of nutrients are gonna be taken up. So I feel like as long as you're not adding soluble nutrients that can mess with the soil test towards the end, you could probably easily get a soil test. If you're gonna be shut down for a couple months, it might be better for you to run some cover crop and then maybe test after you've run the cover crop and broken it down and you're gonna pot back up. So you could totally wait. I think the answer really depends, like I said in the beginning, on what your real goal is. So for the average person that's just crop after crop after crop after crop, I would say that test as soon as you can and just use that data, but don't treat it as the end all be all. Use it to read it kind of like a prescription. If you were to get it from the soil doctor or from us, it's gonna say, hey, to add some more nitrogen, add some more of this, you're high on this, you're low on that. That's gonna give you a great baseline for the entire next round. What I don't want you to do is amend and then test, because some of that's not gonna be available in the soil test right away. And I feel like it's better to potentially right before you harvest, the day of harvest, right after you harvest. The challenge is that it's gonna take you, depending on the time of year, like during the holiday, it could take 2 to 3 weeks. And in normal time of year, you could send off your sample, you could rush overnight it, they could have it done in a couple of days, you could have your answers back, so less than a week. If you're trying to keep things going, this is a business, I would base it on my timeline that's most important. The soil's not gonna change that dramatically much in the last week. And so if you're really trying to plug and play and plant that same day, you could easily preload, overnight a soil sample and get the answers back. But I would say most people aren't planning that far ahead. They're just wondering what their soil looks like. And if you wait till after a round like we did, test it, do the amendment, and you'll get results much like we did on season 2 of the 10x10 that you've been watching. Main difference between that and most rounds, I think some people are gonna wanna go a little faster than we did. So to do that, it wouldn't be a problem to harvest or to take a soil sample before you harvest. Ideally though, I think most people would probably wait till just after if they have the time. It just makes it easier. So next question. DG says, can you please show in your series, when it's time, how you reset the living soil containers? I currently grow organic, but would like to make the switch over to no-till. I'm unable to find any videos that show a time frame and procedure of a new run. Also, I grow perpetually. Is it possible in my 5x5 with 4 30-gallon smart bots? Thanks, love the content. There's a few questions in here, and a lot of these are just preference. First up, let's see, can you show in your series how to reset the living soil containers? I will show that at some point. I did reset the 3x3 container on the last grow, and I did mention in there that had I not done a soil test, this is what I would do, and I show the process. I will discuss that. The thing I can't promise right now is we've not fully dialed in what our next round's gonna look like. I'm pretty confident we're gonna reuse some of the 30 gallons, but I'm not 100% certain. I will be using the 3x3 most likely, so either way, we will get into a reset. Check out the beginning of season 2, I forget which episode, but we go over the soil test and re-amending that 3x3, and that'll teach you a little bit. A little bit of advice, even if you don't watch that, don't overthink this. You can literally just plant back into it and start watering and top dress. You can top dress, then plant back into it. You can cover crop, then top dress, then soil test. Like anything you do is gonna work. As long as you do the less is more, you can always feed it while the plant is going. If you really wanna get hit the nail on the head, I'd recommend the soil test. Okay, Tony, I've been watching your channel for a couple of months now. My question is, could I make my own aloe vera powder and use that as my wetting agent? Just use the fresh aloe. We could go deep into this based on the aloe book that I have discussing the peak amount of active levels in your aloe plant being present in a 4 to 5 year old mature plant growing close to the equator where they're supposed to be grown in the soil outdoors. However, I still think there's huge benefit to the secondary compounds that aloe creates, even if you just buy a little plant and grow it in your grow room and use it for yourself. And I would say that you could make a powder, but the way that I would prefer to do it would be to take the gel, fillet it, and there's a couple of different ways. You can make a puree, and you can then pour that in your freeze dryer, and then it's gonna take all the water out, and you'll have kind of basically a powder, or you can take the actual fillets of the aloe, lay those in the freeze dryer and freeze dry them, and you have something maybe slightly easier to get into a package. Either way, freeze drying would be the way that I would try and attempt to preserve the aloe. And to do that, I wouldn't just go buy a piece of aloe leaf from the supermarket that's been cut for several weeks. I would take my aloe plant, I would cut it fresh, and I would immediately go to freeze drying it. It would be something worthwhile. I just feel like for the effort, it'd be easier just to grow an aloe plant, use a fresh leaf whenever you want. The recipe is about 1/4 cup per gallon, so you would just grab a fillet of decent size, doesn't have to be terribly accurate. A lot of times what I used to recommend, and most people do, is to fillet it, but my favorite way is to take the whole leaf, throw it in the blender with some water, and then pour that back through a colander or a strainer when you dump it into your chapin or your water bucket. That'll get the green parts kind of back out. And I really do believe the whole aloe plant is great to use, where initially we thought just the inner fillet was acceptable. Turns out a lot of the benefits are in the whole aloe leaf, just not for the internal consumption. It may not be worth the effort, and because I'm trying to buy the powder form, we go to great effort to source sun-grown aloe in soil, grown organically, that is near the equator. That way we're potentially accessing the most amount of phytobenefits, the phytochemicals, as possible. But to be clear, I still think there's great benefit to growing your own. I would just use fresh personally if I had access to it, fresh all the time. Let's see, High Life says, in my garden, we got a sunflower directly near the electricity cable. This one ran so much faster and bigger than the other ones. There was a huge difference being near 220 volt house electricity. Don't know how much amperage, but it seems to stimulate the roots, fibers, and cells, like on us. I answered a similar question in one of the most recent FAQs about 2, who I did talk to. I think I shouted him out in the last video saying, yo, I gotta call you, we finally connected. Anyways, we'll be talking about that more in the future. But I did mention that he had run electricity into his beds, and he says that there's benefit to it. I don't know if it directly correlates, but it'd be worth looking into. Obviously, we're all energy, plants are energy. It does make some sense to me. However, being just near the electricity, it might be that correlation doesn't equal causation in this sense, and it could just be that it was the way the sun hit on that side of the house, or the genetics, or how it was watered, or something slightly different. I don't know. I'd like to find out more, I guess. It's not something I'm gonna be doing anytime soon, but I am fascinated by energy and plants, and it does seem like there could be some benefit, but in my mind I'm thinking, the electricity, what would it do? Is it gonna make nutrients more available? Would it just vibrate the plant? I don't know. I'm kind of stumped. Okay, Chris. Chris says, what can you use to help with your buds not be too fluffy? Much love for this community. Two things, well, three things. Genetics, absolute number one. Good genetics, okay? Number two, once you've got good genetics and you're positive that it's something that you like the density of, some of them are just almost too dense, it's ridiculous, but genetics, genetics, genetics. And then from there, lighting. Having the right DLI for your plant, the daily lighting integral, having the right PAR, meaning that you have the right intensity of light, they're not just really having to reach for it. Once it's given sufficient supply of light as its main nutrient, and its genetics are built and ready to make a dense flower. Because think about it, if you're in an area where there's a lot of mold, making a dense flower may not be good, right? So I feel like these plants are smart enough where we're gonna have to choose the genetics towards the preference. Once we've found something that's dense and to our liking, then at that point, it's up to us to support them, to be a good steward. And the lighting is the number one thing that you could be lacking on, because without that energy source, it's not gonna be able to eat all the food that you could potentially give it. And then you're more risking overfeeding it, making larvae flower. And so I would say that genetics, the lighting, and the next, of course, following the BuildASoil way to make sure that there's good nutrients in the soil. Number one way, if you don't know exactly how to do that, is to avoid really small containers where precision is necessary. Get yourself a good volume of a proven recipe and a good amount of light. And then from there, flip it to flower slightly sooner than you think you normally would. And that will lead to a very healthy plant that doesn't run out of nutrients, has great lighting. On the flip side, you can overdo the lighting. So look at our DLI videos, daily lighting integral, and we'll talk about how much the plant actually needs. Once you get that right, your density is going to be on point. Now it's just picking and choosing genetics. So hopefully that helps answer your question. Don't buy any of those products that say bud hardeners. Typically they're growth hormones and problems. There was a lot of grows that would use very dangerous toxic stuff. They were sold as ornamental use only. And since hydro stores weren't really cannabis stores, they would sell it. And people that were growing cannabis for medical or recreational use weren't really monitored. They would use that Pactrabute, I can't even say it. They would use Gravity and Bushmaster and a lot of these products that were really toxic. So stay away from that stuff. Just follow good genetics, good lighting, and good soil, and you'll have dense buds. Last question. Jmart says, hey man, this might sound like a broad question, but what is the future of cannabis? At least in your opinion, on the organic side, where do you see all of this going? Thanks man, enjoy the content. You know, that's a really broad question, obviously, like you said. The future for me is that I want to continue to share this message and help others. Like, for instance, in some of these videos, I can tell people are brand new. And to me, it's like when you are with a child and you get to experience them watching your favorite movie or doing a sport and just seeing the thrill on their face, like passing that torch where when people find this, they get that desire, that the flame is lit within them. That's what we'll be doing in the future, regardless of what that means for BuildASoil. But more specifically what that means, I think that living soil is gonna be more and more of a thing that people are gonna understand as we start to get more of us that are educated in the process. I also think that people on a hobbyist level, a home grower, they're gonna be seeing it more as a lifestyle. And with everything going on in the world right now, I think you're gonna see more people growing their own food, returning a little bit more to their ancestral roots. And I think that cannabis as a medicine will be a very, very important part of that equation, including fungi as well. And so there's gonna be a lot more talk about fungi in the future, about soil building in the future, what that truly means. There'll be advances in soil testing. And I also think that genetics are just gonna be like, obviously there's a lot of good stuff out there right now, but I feel like advances out there will really lead us to be able to more suitably predict phenotypic expressions as far as the terpenes and the actual THC CBD side of it. We'll probably have so much more data on that one will be able to make genetic choices with a little bit more accuracy. And I think that's gonna be really, really, really exciting in the sense that right now, or in the past, you just have to buy every pack there was, learn the language on your own and find out what was good. Nowadays, you can get some really good references. There's some great breeders, but there's equally a lot of bullshit. I think that the future of cannabis, a lot of that is gonna be weeded out, for lack of a better word. And I think that all of us will have access to really good genetics. If things keep continuing the way that they are, as far as legality, I feel like every state and every country around the world, especially here in the United States, will continue to fall, especially as we get to generations like ours that are really fully embracing it and we get older, And we're gonna teach the next generation that this was definitely something that we did wrong. So the future of cannabis looks bright to me. I don't know where else to take it. For me personally, I could go down a lot. Like, I would like to go search the world for genetics. I'd like to have a greenhouse at my house. I'd like to do lots of different things that continue to excite me within this realm, but I have no idea what the future looks like, and I'm just excited to be a part of it. I hope you guys are too, and I thank you for being a part of this series for the last year. Gosh, I don't even know how many followers we have right now, but it all happened a lot faster than anticipated. I genuinely appreciate you guys sticking around, letting me answer these questions for you, and I personally get a lot out of it too. So I hope you guys have a great new year. I'm really looking forward to 2022, and we've got a lot in store for you. So thanks so much, and I'll see you guys on the next episode.